Live from Nashville, Tennessee, USA. It's Nashville's Morning News with Ralph Bristol. To be part of the show, call 737-WWTN. That's 737-9986. Now, here's your host, Ralph Bristol.
Good morning, Nashville. It's Wednesday, May 8th, 2013. Nashville Morning News, Super Talk 99.7 WT. And the market's not doing much this morning. You're up just a little bit, but not remarkable. It's about 52 degrees with a mostly clear sky. It's going to be partly cloudy and 78 this afternoon. And we are pleased to welcome to our studio for the full hour, Representative Joe Carr of Las Casas, Tennessee. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Ralph. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you. You made it official. You threw your hat into the... What kind of hat did you throw into the ring?
10-gallon.
10-gallon hat.
10-gallon Texas hat in honor of my father, who's a Texan. That's
cool.
Right.
Cool.
My mother's a Tennessean. My father's a Texan. So I've got excellent breeding, as they say.
Did you sign the hat before you threw it into the ring so whoever bought it would buy something very famous one of these days when you become, I don't know, like president or something like that?
I should have. I did not. I should have signed the hat.
Why do you want to be in Congress?
I want to see some strong, principled leadership coming out of Tennessee, Ralph. I think what we've got in our country is a problem with how we define leadership. In some part, we have been way too restricted and accepted a definition of leadership that is confined, especially conservative leadership, that is confined to whether it's a vote or whether it's some moral, immoral behavior that we've transgressed in the past. And I want to expand that definition because I think the times that we're in demand much, much more from our political leadership. And the leadership that I'm talking about is that principled leadership that says, I know what I'm going to fight for, and I know what I believe, and I know why I believe it, and I can articulate and communicate those first principles that our founding fathers said was so important to the establishment of this democratic republic that we've seemed to have ventured away from. And I want to rekindle that fire. I want to reestablish those principles, and I want to articulate and communicate that vision for the United States and for Tennessee.
Do you have an idea of how you intend to do that? Because there's a lot of different ways of working in Congress. A lot of people go there and they kind of lay back for a while and wait until they know where all the restrooms are located and develop some friendships and some relationships and maybe pick somebody to follow. Others just go in with guns blazing, like Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, who went in and he became a major figure in the Senate, and he claimed the Jim DeMint seat in the Senate, and arguably he's got it.
Well, and you bring up an excellent pattern for what I'm looking at was as to how to turn this country around and head back towards those first principles that I referred to, and that is Ted Cruz, that is Mike Lee, that is Trent Franks, that is Tom Cotton. These are men that understand what they believe and why they believe, and they're not afraid. As a matter of fact, they're quite willing to confront the establishment way of thinking, and whether that be within their own party, but certainly within the bureaucracy of the government as a whole, and say, you know what, things are worth fighting for, and these are these first principles we're going to fight for. So there's some men and women who are already there that give us that pattern, and I think that's a very good pattern for me to adopt, and I plan on doing just that.
And obviously you can't fight alone because there are 435 members and very powerful committee chairmen and then leaders. And in order to accomplish something, you've got to work either with or around or through them. And through is sometimes not easy. So you've got to learn how to play the game in a large group and accomplish something at the same time you're trying to lead instead of just follow.
Exactly. But I want to go back to something you kind of referenced earlier, and that is the first thing we should demand of our elected officials is a code of conduct and a verifiable conservative voting record. Right now in Tennessee, no congressional or U.S. Senate part of our U.S. Senate delegation scores 80% or higher with the Heritage Foundation or the Madison Project. And those are conservative congressional scorecards they give our elected officials. And I think with states like South Carolina and Arizona and Texas and Oklahoma producing men and women in Congress who consistently score 90% or higher, there ought to be somebody from Tennessee who would score 90% or higher on their congressional scorecard. And that's my pledge, that I'm going to be a conservative, and then I'm going to use my voting platform by which to articulate and communicate those first principles on the stump. I think if we had more men and women speaking out about first principles, I think the people would become rekindled in their hope and their trust in their elected officials. And I think that's real important. It's to lead from the verbiage that you speak on the trail.
For those who don't know you, what are the principles that drive you? What is that that cruise control, basically, that you say, okay, here's the issue coming up. I know Joe Carr's principles, so I can pretty easily predict where he's going to stand on this, and it's going to be consistent with me because we share the same principles. What are those principles that people will line up with or not?
Well, I say it all the time, and I'm going to wear it out, Ralph. But it's found in the Declaration of Independence when our founding fathers told us. He said, we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these, here are the principles. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And every serious issue that this country faces emanates from those corporate principles. If a politician or somebody seeking an elected office comes to you and says, I stand on this issue or that issue, quickly find out what is the core principle that issue or his position or her position stands on from that, and you'll find out whether or not they're going to flip-flop. I hope I submit to that, get a chance to submit to that test, but I think I'm going to pass it.
Representative Joe Carr of Las Casas in Rutherford County, running for the 6th congressional district. Fourth, I'm sorry. The
fourth congressional district.
6th is Diane Black.
That's right.
The 4th congressional district. Now, that includes, it's been redrawn, so it includes Rutherford, part of Williamson.
No, real quickly, it's Rutherford, Bedford, Marshall, Moore, Murray, Lincoln, Franklin, Marion, Grundy, Warren, Sequatchie, Bledsoe, Van Buren, Meigs, Ray, and Bradley.
Now, you know the people pretty well in your House district,
right,
but this is a pretty much larger district. Do you have what do you do to meet the rest of the people, and how do you do that other than here on the radio? I mean, this
Certainly.
radio signal covers all of that area, so they'll get to know you here. How else do you?
Well, I get invited to speak quite a bit at typical town hall meetings or Tea Party groups or groups that are affiliated in some form or fashion with the Republican Party. Yeah. And so I'm delighted to go and speak about to those groups. And so I've done quite a bit of that over the last 6 months anyway, since we kind of got involved in the Second Amendment debate and, of course, the establishment of state exchanges long before I would even entertain the idea of getting in this race. So we have got a number of people out there within the district who believe like you and I do, Ralph, or like I and most of this district do, which is we've got to return to fundamental first principles.
Now, when we come back, we've got to take a break here, and Joe will be with us the rest of the hour. I've got to ask you about the most difficult decision facing members of Congress right now, one that I had a tough time coming down on, and then we'll get to some of the more easy issues that you're going to be running on. Obamacare. Come on, Joe, that's too easy.
That's a softball.
The budget, the deficit, the failure to pass a budget.
Oh, yeah, all that stuff.
Illegal immigration. We got an illegal immigration segment with sound bites. Failed energy policy and assault on the civil liberties. Well, are you going to do a 10th Amendment caucus in Congress if you get there?
Ralph, you laid down the challenge last year. I suspect the challenge is still there. We're gonna take a 10th Amendment caucus to Washington. Absolutely.
7:14 Nashville Morning News. More with Representative Joe Carr on the other side of this break. We'll get you a right now traffic update 1 minute from right now. 7:20 Nashville Morning News, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. All right, now Representative Joe Carr has the high honor of being one of only 3 people who has either read or heard my comprehensive analysis of the Marketplace Fairness Act, a.k.a. the Internet Sales Tax, an issue that he would have to be dealing with if he were in Congress, and an issue he will have to deal with if Congress passes it and it comes back to the states to decide whether they're going to try to collect the use tax from vendors out of state. 7:20 in the morning. Welcome back, Representative Joe Carr of Rutherford County in the studio. He has thrown his hat into the ring. He is an official candidate for Congress in the 4th District of Tennessee. We will have the other candidates in the studio the same way and talk with them about the issues that are being dealt with right now. And the one that I think the most interesting debate in the country right now is over this internet sales tax. Where do you come down on this?
Well, I've kind of been all over the place a little bit, Ralph. But right now I'm kind of leaning a little bit against it But that was before I arrived at the studio, and having read your Ralph rant, now I'm kind of going, oh, geez, now here we go again. And
wobbling again, are you?
Yeah, and this is quite honestly, and I'm going to be candid here. This is a tough one because as I go back to what we were talking about in the previous segment, what's the underlying principle that dictates your position or that's relevant to the issue? And what I want to make sure is that the principle that is promoted here is that we referenced earlier is individual responsibility, personal liberty, or state sovereignty. So to what extent does it violate any of those three principles, or to what extent does it uphold or encourage those those three principles? The irony is I'm under the impression that this may create some constitutional challenges because the federal government is punting the interstate commerce clause back to the states, and I'm unaware that they can do that. In your rant, though, I read where the courts have already ruled that the Congress can do that, deliver that authority back to the states. If that is then the case, then, and I'm not disputing it, I'm just unaware of that court decision, but if that is then the case, then I want to make sure if this comes to the state of Tennessee in the next session to the Tennessee General Assembly, that we absolutely make this revenue neutral. And depending on the amount that Tennessee could receive, we need to create an opportunity where we can create a much more fair and broader and lower tax code within Tennessee to make it a more attractive and fair place to live.
Yeah. In Tennessee, it could be in excess of $500 million.
My goodness.
Because it's $23 billion countrywide. That's
Right.
what the Governors Association estimates. That all the governors get together, put their financial people together, and estimate it would be $23 billion. We are almost an exactly average size state, but we have a higher than average sales tax. If we were an average size state and all states got exactly the same amount, it'd be about about $500 million per state. I would think Tennessee is in for it a little bit more than the average state, so I'm thinking more than $500 million. Let's say it's $700 million.
Okay.
How much could we if we decided we wanted to use all of that revenue simply to lower our sales tax rate? How much lower would that push it?
Ralph, I'm trying to recall.
You know what our sales tax revenue is?
Well, I think it seemed like for every 0.25%, because we lowered it 0.25%, and then we're going to lower it another 0.25%. But
Right.
for every 0.25%, I think the loss in revenue seemed like it was $25 million when we reduced. So you can reduce the rates
Reduce it quite a bit, then.
quite substantially.
With a half a billion dollars, you could lower it. See if it's for 4 percentage points. Could that be right?
I would want to check that now, and that's a
right.
good question, and I'm going to talk to David Thurman and the finance, the commissioner of the finance department.
But the opponents of this have all had to fall back on this is a tax increase for the states. We just don't want to give more money to the states, and the states are not going to use this as an opportunity to broaden the base and lower the rate. They're just going to use it as an opportunity, as a money grab. Is that likely in Tennessee, do you think?
Boy, you don't ever want to predict what a politician's going to do, and I are one of them, as we say. But I want to make sure that the listeners and you and everybody understands this. There is no way I would accept this particular incorporation of this into law in Tennessee law unless we did a commensurate reduction in the existing Tennessee tax code. I mean, we could do a whole lot more with the hall income tax. We could do a lot. We've got a lot of fees and penalty. Well, not penalties. We've got a lot of different fees that we could get rid of on small businesses that are not necessary to the transaction of business. So if that's the case, then what we need to do, we need to spread it out and make the tax code much fairer in Tennessee. And it would make us a more attractive place for industry and people to come and live and raise their families.
Absolutely. If you had $700 million in uncollected revenue you're supposed to be collecting through the use tax, but you don't because nobody bothers to pay it because they don't have to.
Right.
If you had that money and you knew in advance that you're going to use it to lower other taxes, you could make Tennessee, which is already a fairly attractive tax state, an even more attractive tax state. And if other states didn't do the same thing, we could get a major advantage out of this, not a tax increase as others are